Hi, my name is Clare Barrett, and I'm delighted to be here on the Access Chats with Mark O'Brien.
Hi, Claire.
How are you getting on?
Not too bad, and I'll have to come clean that I clarified Claire earlier on today by kind of sending her a Zoom link when she was at work, which is not really, a very yeah. So apologies.
It was not at all. It was grand. Just a slight panic there now, but otherwise it all went well.
So come here, talk to me about the young Claire. I suppose actually the more I ask this question, I think it's better at probably asking people around you at the time. But do you think you were seen as a person that was destined to be where you are now?
I think there's probably people who would say, because there was a very big community arts involvement in the parish that I grew up with, and there was a lot of people involved in a local pantomime society. My parents would have been involved. Kathy Belton's parents would have been involved. She grew up down the road from me, that kind of thing. So we were encouraged to be part of that, in the arts, and it was just something that was kind of started in the 70s in a recession to sort of have something to do on a winter evening, and there was a young group of performers called the Smurfs, for want of a better word. We were small, we weren't blue, but we were blue from the cold from the parish hall, but that was about it. And so I went into it at the age of 4, and it was my first time. And then the following year they came back, actually we auditioned, and the lady who ran it said, Eileen McCartney, who's passed away unfortunately, but she said that anybody under 7 must leave now. It's only for children over 7. And I proceeded to leave, and she went, "Where are you going?" And I went, "I'm only 5." And she goes, "But that means that last year you were," and she was like, "It's okay, I'll work it out." And so I got in then and was in it till I was kind of 12, and it was a great way to be involved. I was involved in a lot of bits. I did speech and dramas from when I was a child, but it was just a pastime really, and a hobby. I think in a family of 4, I certainly wasn't, there was 3 or 4 other potential performers as well. It wouldn't have necessarily been me, but it certainly wasn't really in the family either. I had one cousin who's a fantastic singer, and that was something that, maybe she was destined for that, but I don't think a professional life in the arts was anything that my family ever thought about, really. It wasn't in the mix.
When you went through school, like in primary school, and then you're doing speech and drama, you're doing the Smurfs. Sorry, I just have
the Smurfs. I know, you do, yeah. It's all that and more. Yeah.
I often thought when I was doing these chats, I should ask people to bring around old photographs, but maybe I should have.
There's a lot of muffs. There's a lot of muffs involved, and that kind of thing. So.
Clear to me then, when you kind of went into secondary school, was the interest kept for you?
It was. I tell you what actually kept my interest in it. I studied speech and drama studies, elocution, what it would have been as a kid, with Rebecca Bartlett, who was part of Druid back in the day. And so we went to her house, and it was kind of one-on-one, and then she ended up just busy, and family life decided to stop those classes, but she started to have group classes then in improvisation. And I think my mum thought, well, you should just do your elocution exams. And I begged her to be part of that. And then that for me is when it took off. And none of the rest of my family had done that aspect of it. I adored that and kept it up. And then we moved from a local hall in Renmore to Nuns Island, which is still a venue today, and did that until Rebecca stopped doing it. But then we started to go to see things like that she was in. My first play I ever went to see in Druid was I Do Not Like Thee, Dr. Fell, and she was in the first edition of that. And it was unreal. My mum was brilliant now. She had been somebody who was an only child, so she involved us in everything. And they wouldn't have had a lot of money. It was the 80s in Ireland and that kind of thing, but she brought us to everything. And that was the arts festival that was on, that was free and outdoors, and around the same time as that sort of primary school time and going to Rebecca and stuff, we went to see Los Comedians outdoors, and they were a Spanish performance group, and my mind was blown, and then from there into secondary school, the Footsbarn would have been a big deal, and they came every year, and suddenly you had Shakespeare. But my school to be honest, wasn't particularly artsy. There were people involved and have been on, like Judith Higgins, who would have been involved in Macnas, Noni Kavanagh, who runs Macnas. They were all a year or so ahead of me. Kathy would have been in the same school, Kathy Belton, I mentioned before. And so there was a history of it. Like, I think even Gary Hines went to Taylor's Hill back in the day, but it wasn't necessarily run by the teachers themselves, but there would have been the school production. But that was basically, you know, if you had long hair, you were a boy because it could be plaited, and if you, you know, you played the male parts. It was an all-girls school, and I played Mr. Bumble because I could hit the note. That was basically it for one boy. And I was raging. Then it was one of those things where you were asked to do something, and you know, oh, I can do that. But then you end up realizing you've cut yourself out of the part that you actually wanted, which was Nancy, like, you know, but that was a life lesson. But so we did a lot of stuff in it, but I kept it up myself. But community games, there was variety teams, that kind of thing, which was 15 minutes of drama. And in the mad small world as it is, that's how I got to know the Maeve Inglesby very well. And then I ended up in college with Gus McDonough. And so all of these people, our lives intertwined in different ways before I actually took it on. And then I was in a performing arts school that only opened in my last year in Galway, in my Leaving Cert year. And I took part in that. And that was kind of, they were teachers that came down from Dublin. And there was a fabulous American lady called Anne Shoemate who used to work in Bull Alley. And then as the school got bigger, that's where I met Jimmy Fay for the first time. He came down to be a teacher. And he was only just out of college really himself, so he needed a hand with the smaller kids. So because I was one of the older kids, and I had just done my Leaving Cert at the age of 16, kind of just turned 17, and I was applying to get in to be a nurse and couldn't get a place in it until I was 18. It was the old school nursing up interview and that kind of thing. So I used to be Jimmy's assistant on Saturday morning, then go to classes myself in the afternoon. And like, when you think about it, like the Madison, I'd come up and down and see plays that his company were doing in Dublin, like, you know, like bizarre kind of how it meshed. But it didn't dawn on me that this was, I had applied to do it, I think, with my Leaving Cert, my CAO form. But my mum and dad kind of, and they'd never stopped me from doing anything, but they just were like worried that it wasn't a, you know, what they knew as a real job, you know. And that was the first time they ever stopped me, to be fair. Like, I did a show the week before my Leaving Cert, I did a play, like, and so they were happy to me to be involved in all of those kind of things because they knew I do the other work and things. But I just think they thought it wasn't a profession for, you know, they didn't know anybody who was making their way in the world with it, like,
yeah.
So.
And I mean, it's funny you mentioned, I mean, being from Glenmore, being from Galway, like a comedian and that kind of time, the amount of people that I've spoken to that have came up around that same era and that particular company and the effect
they had
on a whole population of people is incredible.
Yeah. And I didn't mention, like, Dermot Arrigan, I suppose. He was somebody that did go on, like, he was involved in Punchbag Theatre and that kind of thing. And so there were people out there, but my parents just didn't know them well enough. Like, you know, they would have even known Kathy, but she was starting off, you know what I mean? So they were kind of a bit, they were just worried about it. But then when I went to come and do it by myself years later to go back and study, they were all supportive, like, and kind of, okay, you know, and so you have something to fall back on. It's the fall back on mentality of the permanent pensionable job that was very much in their minds, you know, at the time.
So you went and studied to be a nurse?
Oh, I did, yeah. I'm truly glad. I was laughing because I was listening to Helen's interview and I was like, this will be the people who left nursing series. And I trained to be a general nurse, and then I did a higher diploma, master's in paediatrics in Harker Street Children's Hospital in Trinity. So, and then I worked in the paediatric operating theatre in Tala Hospital when we transferred out there. And then they made me permanent, and then I gave it all up and I went back and studied acting.
Go back there a second.
Yeah. So, I took a very long way around to get here.
But I suppose, I mean, when you were in college, did kind of the theatre, the acting still grab a hold? I mean, was it still there for you? Obviously, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I used to take holidays to do plays, like, you know, which are to do musicals mostly, because that was kind of youth, the youth theatre in Galway. The youth theatre really didn't start until I was 15, but most other people were 16, 17.
Yeah.
And my mum thought I was a bit young, to be honest, because everybody in it, it's different from, say, youth theatre now, where there are 14 and upwards. But at the time, most of the people actually were in their early 20s, and they were certainly 18, you know, and my mum thought maybe not to be hanging around with those lads now in Nuns Island would have been the wise thing. So I probably, she knew me very well, that I'd been led astray. So I didn't start with them, and then they became stronger and involved more people after the fact. But when I was nursing at that stage, then I wouldn't have had the time off to do it. So I would do musical theatre, was something that you could rehearse in the evening on an amateur level and still perform on the stage. And so I would have been part of a lot of festivals and did a lot of shows that way. But like, I literally would take my holidays to do the show, the week of the show, and then I would do rehearsals and go up and down every night from Ballymun to Galway to rehearse, you know.
Was singing always a big thing for you? Like, you know.
Well, yeah, it wasn't like like when I did perform in art school now, it wasn't so much that was more about the acting. Like, as I said, Anne Shoemate was a fantastic, she still is a fantastic woman and teacher, you know, and I think she was the first one that made me think that it could be a profession for me, acting, you know, and she really encouraged me to apply. And as I said, it was really just my mom and dad kind of saying, maybe it's not, you know, that I changed it on my CAO, but I always kept that in the back of my head, and her encouragement, like, she's phenomenal. I know Sarah Morris has worked with her years later, you know, this, and she's a fantastic woman, and she gave me the grow for kind of maybe going forward to do that and stuff I would have done with Rebecca. And but then the singing was a way of sort of keeping that in, and I could sing, so I suppose it was a way to maintain performance, like to be able to, you get little parts, and a lot of the time I wouldn't necessarily have the big singing parts. I would have the acting parts in the musical, if you will, or the more character driven roles maybe. Yeah. But because I could hold a tune, then, you know, I got some nice roles because of it, like, you know. So.
And then, I mean, you know, not only did you do nursing, but by the sounds of it, you did very well at nursing, and you were very good at what you did, obviously. So that must have been a huge decision for you to divert, was it?
It was, because I never left it because I didn't like it. Like, a lot of people think, oh God, is it just you weren't suited? And because people talk about it as this vocation, you know, the same way they say about acting and that kind of thing. But I think if you love anything, you'll stick with it. You know, I mean, I adored what I did. I loved working with I loved particularly working in the operating theatre because it was a multidisciplinary team, and working with that. I loved the patients, and like my general training, I absolutely love. But pediatrics, I was always drawn to kind of the care of the elderly or the care of the very young, and that was kind of, so I specialised in that. And I loved working in an operating theatre, like but it was bizarrely to go from one theatre to another was weird. But it was I think what happened was, it just, the demands of it were that it had started to kind of encroach on what I thought was my hobby. This is where I kind of, so here was I taking time off to do plays and rehearsal, but then as you become a staff nurse and you're doing on call and you're working in a profession, something in me was like, so like when they made me permanent, I actually only lasted about 3 months, and then I left and I moved to Galway and took a job that let me do more plays. And in my mind, I didn't tell anybody this, but I was going to apply to acting college, because I think it was just a part of me that was never fulfilled. And I always thought that if I did it, sure, I had my nursing now, I was good at it, you know, and I was accelerating in the nursing to go to a level, you know, like probably specializing in, you know, in the theatre was probably what I was destined for, like, you know. And I just kind of wanted, I just thought I'd have this regret. And I was kind of mad, I think, at the time, to do, you know, and it worried a lot of people. But because I think because I did it in a gentle way, like in that I took the time away from the job in Dublin to do more sort of, it wasn't agency working, but it was sort of, I worked in the regional, but with very particular hours. Like, I mean, also it's the arrogance of youth. I went in and kind of said, I can only work these hours because I want to do plays. And I remember the woman being horrified, you know what I mean, kind of thing. And she goes, well, we have a permanent job. And I said, no, I left a permanent job. I don't want a permanent job. And like, when you think about it, like, but I was sort of, and it worked out for me, but I didn't tell anybody that I was doing it. There was a fabulous lady, Colette Heaney, who used to work with on Thybark, and she kind of schooled me in my auditions. And I just applied to 2 places, and I applied to DIT as it was, or TU Dublin now as it is, and to Trinity, and I took the place, and I ran with it then. Like, yeah, I think it was the permanent job where I suddenly went, oh my God, you're 24, I was at 23 or 24 or something like that, and I could see my life happening, you know what I mean, ahead of me. I could see it. I could see my colleagues, and actually I was very young to be in the position that I was, to have that dual qualification and everything. Most people that were getting the dual qualification were already in their 30s with kids or married or whatever. And I just said, oh my God, I could just see myself like not doing it ever. You know, it was either now or never. And I kind of went, but I also never expected to get it. So I thought when I did my audition, if I get a no, then that's it. There's the thing. I tried. It didn't work out. I'll go back to something else, you know, but, or keep it up as many people do on an amateur level and enjoy it, you know what I mean, as the hobby. But once I started doing it, like, I mean, you're terrible imposter syndrome, because you'll always think you're a nurse and, you know, that kind of thing. And you expect somebody to say, go back to the day job now. So that took a while to get over, but I loved being in college, doing something I'd always wanted to do, and very different from medicine.
Was that kind of like when you made that decision and went back to college? It sounds to me like it was like oh fuck, this is oh
my God, yeah, absolutely was like, and they were so good. I remember Susie Kennedy was one of my lecturers though. In the first, I took a feminism sort of course for the first semester. You know, they had these optional kind of courses. But in the first week or something, we learned that like the statistics for women were so shocking bad, like basically that your career was from 16 to 25, and then it didn't start up again then till your late 40s. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to graduate and I have a window of like 6 months. Do you know what I mean? And so, but otherwise, I think I just enjoy because even though everybody else was just out of school, like, so there was a difference in maybe maturity or life experience or whatever, but we were all starting, where acting was concerned, we were all starting at the same level, because we were all learning the same things, which is the same of any rehearsal room, really. Everybody's starting at the same thing. Doesn't matter how much experience you have outside of it. This is a new thing. And I just was loving the freedom of being allowed to read around the subject. In medicine, it's wrong or right, and at least you can have an opinion in a rehearsal room, or you can have an opinion about a piece of art that, you know, whereas you don't really get an opinion or time for an opinion in an operating theatre. There's a right and a wrong way to do it, and if you do it wrong, you know, that's not good.
And did you go did you also go in, because you've been acting for kind of, you know, many years, did you also go in and kind of have to, you know, unpick an awful lot of stuff for yourself as well? Was the presumptions that you had that kind of, you know, was there?
Yeah, I think there probably was some stuff, but I think I was so open to it. Like, I was a bit of a kid in that way now, and I was just, give me everything you know what I mean? And I'd try anything or do anything that I kind of didn't think, actually. I never thought that the world of amateur musicals or whatever was the same. I mean, to be honest, what you did learn, and which I would have kept with me, is good stage etiquette, which, you know, is sort of something that if you learn from good people, which I did, about touching props and leaving props back and that kind of stuff, like, and, you know, when to come in and when to come off and what was upstage and downstage, those kind of things I held with me, and I had maybe a slight advantage on some people for that, but or respect for your costumes, or, you know, that kind of thing. But I didn't, I don't think I'd learned a tremendous amount, like what you would do on that level. I hadn't worked particularly with maybe directors that changed my life kind of crack, like, you know what I mean, whereby that I would have gone, oh, it's their methodology and no other way, you know. So I was very much an open book, and you can tell me whatever, like, you know.
And then, Clare, the moment then of kind of, okay, you've left the career, you've gone to college, you've loved it, but then on the far side of that, then there's the emerging into a whole new career, you know, the emerging the reality of you know, not being able to rock into a hospital and kind of go, I'm only going to do these hours and those hours, and you know, that was that a huge kind of massive change in your head?
It was actually. Well, it was kind of a thing of, because in the 3 years you're like, it's okay, the potential is always there, you know, the happening, everything, and then my showcase had gone very well for me, but it was a whole other world and a different way of working, and I didn't quite understand that when somebody says ring me next week, it could be potentially a job, you know what I mean? It just all felt very unclear and vague to me a little bit, like, you know. And I was like, so what does that person mean? Oh no, they won't talk about it here, don't ask them that question here. I was like, okay, but you know, so what do? I asked them, and you know, it was just, and like colleges are great like that. I think they've got much better because people have kind of said, look, we need to know about the industry. But college is wonderful and it teaches you. For me, it gave me something to hang my hat on. It meant that I could kind of walk into a room and didn't feel like such a fraud. I could say, no, I actually studied a bit about that. I know tiny, you know what I mean, or I know how to get that information. But it doesn't teach you what I didn't at the time. Like now they have seminars, master classes with casting agents and people like that. But I just didn't know how that world worked at all. And I have to say, I learned from workshops, other actors being really kind to me. And I got invited to a workshop with Corn Exchange, actually out of my showcase, which was the week after. And I was in a room with lovely people like Andrew Bennett and, you know, like all these fantastic people. And they were all sitting around in a circle saying, oh, well, I've been working for how many years or this kind of thing. I was like, I'm out of college 5 days, you know, this kind of thing. I have no clue. But I was fascinated by them, and maybe naivety and ignorance makes you throw yourself into something maybe a bit more, you know. But all of those people said, like, and then I did another workshop again after that, and then one with Barabbas, and through that you'd meet people and they'd be like going, you're new, are you, do you have an agent? You might say no, and they're like, okay, well, I'll send you an email if I hear of Anthony, or, you know. And like, you got your Irish theatre handbook, and I just started writing to people that they were kind of, I sort of thought like, well, we might have an affiliation, or they might like me as a person or as a performer, so I'd write to them, like, do you know what I mean? And sometimes it was pie in the sky and sometimes it wasn't, you know. And like, that's how a connection with Barabbas started for me, like, do you know what I mean?
And then what was kind of, I mean, I think you know, from knowing you working kind of, you know, there's a certain, I mean, you mentioned kind of naivety and kind of innocence, but I think there's also kind of a taking people as you see them. So like, if it's an industry, this is the way it should work. So I should be, you know. And I think that also comes with age and comes with kind of, you know, and going, well, that, if you do mean that, then that should be what it means. So
what it is, go on, sorry.
No.
That's exactly it.
Like when kind of, when parts started to happen, like, was there a kind of a different, like, then when you're in college, but then into a rehearsal room, you know, that's again a very different thing.
Yeah. And I worked with, my first job was with Team Theatre Company. Yeah. And I had the lovely Martin Murphy and Myrna Ahern, you know, and that was, for me, like, you know, there was maybe other actors that had worked in it who were kind of a bit further along, who were like, oh, you have to put the set up and every day and take it out. I'm like going, it's amazing, and they're paying us to do it. This kind of thing. I was very much of that sort of it. And they were like there was, you're like, and that's graft, like, they were a fabulous company, but like, we did it for very small kids, and you're talking 2 shows at the crack of dawn, like, after traveling in a down terrible roads in a van, like,
and you had a fairly kind of full-on costume as well in that show, if memory serves me.
We did. We had full-on body lycra and a fat suit. There you go. They can't beat the glamour. Yeah. But a fantastic set by Ferdy and Murphy. And no matter how cynical you could be or tired you could be, the minute that little hive opened and you heard the gasps, you were like, oh, this is kind of cool. You know what I mean? You know, and Team was a fantastic organization. I know it's not there in its form as it was, but like, for me, they really, I think that was my bread and butter, in that I sort of, that's where I laid the ground rules. That's where I learned a lot, and from then you built on it, like, you know.
Yeah, and also, like, there were long contracts. You know what I mean? I think that was a huge thing. They kind of gave you an in, and it was there for 5 months. You know that. Yeah,
that was 5 months, like, with a break at Easter holidays. Like, we had 2 weeks paid holidays. I mean, and actually that's where it was kind of funny. You're talking real life kind of stuff. I suddenly started to spend money like I was back nursing, like I was earning. You know, and I didn't think that, because I thought, this is it now. You've got your first job. It'll keep happening. And no, that's unfortunately. And so they were all lessons learned along the way. So it doesn't matter if you're older going into it or younger going into it. These are still lessons you have to learn. Oh God, okay, I have to now know how to manage downtime. And like I say, I finished that job in June. And then my next job really wasn't, I had a couple of radio plays which were fantastic, but I didn't have another job until the following Christmas. And, you know, so it was how to orchestrate that and then go, and not feel like a failure if you went back to nursing. Like, I think that's age and experience to know this is how we have to do it in order to stay alive. You have to do the thing. But they're hard things to get in your mind when you've decided you've given up one thing and you are now another thing, you know. And
also you have people from kind of, you know, outside the industry who they look back on your amazing career and CV over the last 20 so years and kind of go, God, you're always working. And they go, well, yeah, but no, and yeah, and I think that you know.
Yeah. And like, actually, it was very funny. Somebody, I shall remain nameless now because in case they don't want to be name checked, but they said to me very early on, like, if you're not working, don't be giving out about it and don't be going online talking about it. And I kind of took that to thing and I was like, okay. And they said, because you're kind of belittling yourself a little bit, like, kind of thing. You're working in your own way, like, and you can work yourself at home. Now, that doesn't suit everybody, and it's a different world now. We have all manner of more social media than we would have at the time. But like, I think it's kind of a thing of, you do the work when you're doing it, and then when you're off work or you're unemployed or whatever, then you're making new work for yourself. So you are always working. He kind of said, he was kind of going, don't fall into the I'm not working kind of slumber, because then if you do that, you know, it's never going to come to you. We always have to be pushing ourselves a little bit and right. But there has been like, and the gas thing is, you said working for 20 years, but I'm actually only out of college. Like, I've actually only been professionally active for like 15 or 16 years, I think. 15
well, then you're even more impressive.
Because, but that's the thing. And like, I was kind of funny because I didn't come out as, I don't think I'd ever have been the ingenue anyway, but I came into the middle, a sort of bracket of age, like, in that I was in my late 20s, about to turn 30. So people sort of always assumed that I had been there, but that I mightn't have been working. Do you know what I mean? So that was kind of something that happened to as well.
Case in my, I was looking at your CV yesterday, kind of going, it was impressive that at 20 years. Now it's even more impressive at 15 or 16. But come here,
tis the print, tis the font. That's all it makes it look better.
I mean, there won't be time to go through every single one of your productions, but I'm interested in particular anchor ones. You know, things that I mean, in the early years, you know, you were involved in a lot of great stuff, and also your work as well was like touring. You know, like from team. Was that something that you kind of liked? Was touring an adventure for you? Was it kind of?
Yeah, very much so. Like, and I kind of, you know, and to be honest, it was very funny. By the time I actually got to do my first sort of in-house, in the Abbey, like, kind of thing, I'd been working maybe 4 or 5 years before I did my first job in the Abbey. And then it was suddenly strange to be in the one town. I kind of thought all theatre was touring, nearly, because that's all I kind of got, to be honest. And it was like just part of it, like, and I love that kind of the packing the suitcase and going off and, you know, traveling. And like, for me then, say, there was a lot of that with Performance Corporation and Tall Tales and companies like that. And then when we did it with I Heart Alice, like, I mean, not only was it an adventure, but you got to do it with one of your best pals, and to find, you know, to travel the world. We got everywhere with it. And to be honest, actually, that why I bring that up is that I mentioned it to somebody. Oh, I'm so excited we're going to Australia with it. And this actor, I would have worked with a couple of times, but he's a good bit older than me. And he said, oh, I can't believe it. He said, another person. He said, what? And he said, he had done acting in college and had been working since he's like 19, 20. And his one dream was, when all his friends from college were heading off to do Australia and everything like that, he said, no, I'll get there with a play. And that was whatever, 2013, and he was 58 and had never got there, you know what I mean, with a play. And it's just pure chance, like, you know, whereas, and for me, I was like, oh, I never got to do it with the nursing, because a lot of my nursing pals, I went on to do my dual qualification while everybody else went to Australia. And everybody thought I was mad, but I had it in my head, if I don't keep studying now, then I'll never go back to do it, you know, or some, whether that was right or wrong, I don't know. But so everybody else went off traveling. So this was just an amazing opportunity to get to go to all these places, like, you know, and to do it with a job that you loved just seemed like the icing on the cake.
I mean, it's funny, like, that production I was absolutely, I mean, beautiful is an overused word, but that was absolutely beautiful piece of work. But yeah, it did connect everywhere. I mean, it kind of, and did you have a sense of that kind of when it was being built, like when you were kind of You know, I'm sorry, not how the audience would take it, but I mean, do you have a sense that you were dealing with something that was kind of delicate and special?
Yeah, at the time it was something, it was just it was a project that we really wanted to do, like, and it stemmed from an idea that Amy had, like, was that she had been part of the next stage when it was the documentary season. Lachlan kind of had a theme of documentary season, and she happened to be on the next stage, and everybody kept talking about documentary theatre as being the only true form of theatre, and of course they are, that's their expertise and that's their area of things. But she said the more she sat there listening, she was like, that belies everything that I do as a storyteller. Like, if I can't be a fictional story and I can't make you feel the same emotions, you know what I mean? Well, then what's the point of us, or what's the point of writing anything new? So it started kind of nearly as an experiment of that, to see could it be pulled off. And then, to be honest, when we did, like, when you're making something like that, I'm sure you're such a hub for new plays like that. There's this terrible thing when you're in the thick of something that you just can't see the wood from the trees, and it feels good to you, and it feels very organic, and like any of the development, you know, that we did for it, like, it just felt so perfect. And yet you're going, you know, you ask people to come in and have a look at it, and they're reacting very nice, but they're the kind of people that aren't going to gush at you anyway. They're just going to tell you, that's crap, lose that, edit this, put in that, whatever, you know, which is what you want them to do. So it really wasn't until the week in the New Theatre when we first did it that we realised that anybody wanted, and we hadn't a clue. To say that we were like green was the, we had no producer at the time, like so it was just ourselves. And I remember lovely Clare ringing up from ITI, well, she was in project as well, to say like that somebody was coming and could we have the, what are they called, the house seats. And so I hold the phone to him and I said, she's looking for house seats. And Amy goes, what are they? Tell her to queue up. I was like, God. I said, we don't know. I said, we don't know if we've house seats. Yeah, I think there's a waiting list on the thing. Whereas, like, had we any clue, like, that the people with the house seats were the probably people who were going to employ us in the future. Like, we didn't know anything like that. So, but as the week went on and people were fighting to get tickets and the word was spread, we were like, oh, maybe this is a good thing. And then suddenly people were approaching us to say, I want to produce it and I want to do this. And then you go, and you could feel it with the audience. And that was always a lovely thing with the others. And it didn't work if you didn't get it. If you didn't feel the audience leaning in with you, then it wasn't a good night. But it rarely ever happened, to be honest, that didn't happen, because the way it was done, they had to kind of, they were the third person in the play, you know what I mean? So their performance was equally as important as ours in a way. So, and that thankfully kind of happened wherever we went all over the world, like even in Iceland and Croatia. It was bizarre. Like, yeah.
It did go all over the world into the most bizarre places. Like, where maddest places you performed at?
Croatia, a gay festival in Croatia was probably the weirdest, because it was in, do you know the old Eastern European theatres? They're massive. Yeah. So we were in this giant theatre, and he had seen it in Australia, so it wasn't supposed to be part of our tour, and then it was booked on, and he told Jen Coventry, who's our producer, and kind of in front of us as well, that it's really not that gay. Like, it's not gay enough kind of thing to be in it. But that it's which was never, anyway, it was never supposed to be a gay story. It was supposed to be a love story, but it just happened to be about people that Amy really wanted to write about, people who were kind of unseen, if you know what I mean, who were the people that you walk past every day and that you didn't necessarily go, oh, we should write a play about them. You know, it was those kind of people that she wanted to write about. And so that was kind of the funny thing. Like, we never set out to be a gay play, and the festival that he saw us in wasn't a gay theatre festival, and that was the first gay theatre festival we actually did. But he was kind of going, yeah, it's a bit kind of mild, you know what I mean, it's not quite out there enough, but we'd like to have you, kind of thing. So off we went to Croatia, to this barn of a place, like, and we had people, but, and all our shows were in, and nobody, there was no surtitles. We had kind of said, do you want surtitles? And they said no. And so they were very responsive, but it was a different feeling, because their audience was much more removed from us too. Like, even when we did big theatres in Australia, they seemed to kind of cocoon us a little bit, kind of thing. We seemed to be more, but this theatre was the old school proscenium arch, way back, people going to the thing. And but it was a fantastic experience too as well. Like, when are you ever going to get to do? And we had beautiful ones in Tasmania as well. There was a fantastic woman running the 12 Days on the Island Festival, an Irish lady, and she, prior to that, the or in her success or her predecessors kind of terms, they used to do them, they'd pick a town for you, so you could be Hobart or another city and Launceston, I think is the other one, and you would perform there for your 10 days. But she decided to hire cars, and that we would literally be 10 days on the island, and that we would go to different things. So we went to the Freycinet region, we went to this tiny little town where, I mean, Cleaver Regan, I think, is still haunted to this day. They had to clear possums off a stage, like, and mouse droppings and things like that. And but it was a tiny little community hall. And then we went to a school that was like Home and Away, which at this state-of-the-art theatre where people came, and they said that's a very conservative town, a town where a lot of unemployment, and they didn't know how well we'd go down, whether we'd be too controversial, you know. But everywhere they had this, like, Jen had this idea that we would get somebody to make a cake for the Alice's in every town. So every time we went to, they made a cake, and we would take our pictures with the cake, the lady who made the cake, and then it would be used in the show, like, you know. So there was a little bit of an involvement from that, like, but that was a great. We have the freedom of the Freycinet region, and the premiere of I think it only involves a little pin in that kind of stuff, but it was very nice, and so we did get to go to the really like some very extreme places where you never would see it, like, you know.
And Claire, go back a bit then. You're kind of, you know, before that, I mean, you kind of would have an associate. I mean, obviously you'd worked with Annie in the workshop, and you'd obviously went on to work with Annie with Corn Exchange, and also Veronica Coburn and Barabbas would have been kind of you know, stitched through her career as well. And particularly with Veronica, I mean, you know, you've been backed by her quite a lot over the years, which
yeah, which is very. I mean, Veronica Coburn, only for her, like, I always say, very grateful to Veronica Coburn. She's sort of, and I know, and I did like that. It was just a workshop, actually, and I didn't work with Veronica in the first workshop. It was a clowning workshop, and it was something that I was always very interested in. Went and did it, and huge. Like, that was where I met Amy, actually, for the first time. She just happened to be part of the workshop too as well. I met Georgina Miller, Georgina McKevitt, lots of people from, you know, kind of the industry in there. And they were just some people who just, everybody's at different stages of their career. And it was with Raymond. And thankfully, Raymond said at the end of the week, this girl, they were looking to do a show, 40 Songs of Green, and he recommended me. And Veronica didn't know me from Adam, so I went and did a development week. And then from that, we developed a relationship, which is now a friendship. And, you know, I'm very grateful to her, but she would have put me in touch with Deirdre Kinahan, who developed that relationship, like, and then Deirdre Kinahan introduced me to Joe Mank. You know, there was lots, so it passed on, like, kind of thing that way, like, so. But Veronica does always go back to the start of it, like, of course. It all stems from,
But you mentioned, you mentioned kind of, you know, Joe Mangan, obviously, you know, with Performance Corporation has been there, you know, as well. And I suppose there was a time when all those companies were kind of coming through as well. Do you know what I mean? There was, I mean, obviously Barabbas had been there, but there was different types of work emerging from them as well, you know, and to be part of that, and also then to be part of, I mean, one thing which is brilliant about your career and brilliant about your acting, which I absolutely adore, is your precision and your presence is kind of, you give to whatever scale of, I know everybody does, but like you moved between the epic, you know, big house stuff and smaller stuff effortlessly. Do you know what I mean? I think that's because sometimes it's hard. You see people in smaller stuff and they might get slightly lost on a bit bigger stage. Or you see people on a bigger stage and they can't kind of, you know, rein it back in a bit for small. But I mean, you have that great skill, Claire, that can move between them all. And I think and your work has been like that. And is that something that you kind of enjoy doing, kind of going from one to the other?
Oh yeah, I think I love it. Like, thank you very much. You're very kind. I maybe I didn't think about it so much as like, I've always been good in the room in relation to sort of development of stuff. So a lot of those newer companies were doing a new work that needed a bit of time, like, do you know what I mean? And then because of that, and maybe an openness to that meant that I thankfully got work with them. Like, so I would do a development and then still be employed when the show came to be, like, do you know what I mean? And that maybe because you have, in the smaller work particularly, if you have been involved in that from the offset, you have more of a linchpin with it, like, do you know what I mean? Whereas in the bigger houses, you might be doing the canon or you're doing something like that. So that's a different beast of a thing, and it's a different set of skills maybe, like, but I enjoy both.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, you know, for me, like, maybe I don't have as much film experience, but it's something that I miss in film. Like, you know, mostly my film roads have been a day here, a day there, 4 days, or, you know, that kind of thing. And it, like, if you're involved in something from the beginning, then it's a different thing, like, you know. And I think that's what rehearsals are, that's what development is. And like, I don't know, and if that's the answer to your question, I think I'm rambling, but it's a kind of a, for me, that's what happened with those smaller plays or smaller productions, where that you were involved in them prior to them actually being in rehearsal.
Yes.
Which meant you had more of a stake or more of a draw for them, or you could see something that maybe was a glimmer of your idea or somebody else's idea that you were like, oh my God, look how that's grown, isn't that bad? You know, and you could hang your hat onto those kind of things.
There's also as well, I mean, you know, kind of in those years, like, you know, because I think as well, the fully formed, like when you're in kind of one of the bigger pieces or an ensemble piece on one of the bigger stage, like the Olympia or the Gaiety or the whatever, you know, that what I look again, you know, compliment time again. What I love about your work is that the position you bring to kind of, you know, character parts, let's say a horrible fucking word, but like, you know, character parts in play, that the whole life is lived there. And I think that might come from the work, the physical work with Bravos and Cornish, that kind of development work, that they're living, breathing people, you know, which I know every actor is supposed to be able to do that, but, you know, I think it's a great skill to have.
I thank you. I did, and I don't know, like, if it's something that I'm always conscious of, but I think it's something maybe even comes from the nursing a lot of the time. Like, you would have been in close contact with a lot of people, so I have had good observation or time to work with people in that kind of way. Like, and it's something I'd be. I always have been, as I said, very interested in, like, the older and the younger, and I think that, and it's not that I don't want to nurse people at my own age, or I didn't, or anything like that. I just found that we all, there's a certain period of our life where we create this persona that we think everybody wants to see, kind of thing. And the fact is that everybody's the same in their pajamas. It doesn't matter, like, you know, what rank or wealth you are. But unfortunately, people in this middle bracket try to hold on to that kind of thing, whereas children and elderly people just don't care. Like, and I spent a lot of time talking and with these people and learning about their lives and observing little movements and things like that I feel I draw on now, like, sort of thing, like, you know, to bring a reality to it, like, because you know, there's only, you do a lot in drama school and stuff like that, but it is sometimes life experience and trying to get people to see, actually, you know, you've met this person before, like, in some capacity, like, you know what I mean? Now, they're not, you know, you won't meet the Lady Macbeths or whatever generally, but there's a version of them somewhere, like, you know, and are they weren't born like that, you know, so what brought them to that thing, like, you know, and you've come, I think about people's lives a lot, and hopefully try and sort of interpret that then back into my work.
Interesting, and you mentioned Helen Bean earlier on, because she also mentioned that about nursing, about the empathy, about having to be beside people when they're sick, and that. Yeah. But I suppose as well, Claire, I mean, as you know, you look at stuff like, you know, you still got stuff like, say, Minding Frankie, you know, a play like that, and on a big stage. You know, and yet
with two of us going.
Well, exactly.
Is it going?
But yeah, and there's been a few of those. You know what I mean? But yeah, having to fill those spaces, but also to be. You mentioned the kind of, you know, the I Heart Alice Heart Eyes to kind of draw people in, get them leaning forward. I mean, that must be an amazing feeling, being in an auditorium that size with private play, a very kind of, you know, discreet, you know, private piece, and feeling that kind of draw.
Yeah, and it wasn't even so much like in Croatia, we felt a bit separate, but I remember going into the theatre we went to in Brisbane, which a lot of companies would have played their pan and everything, you know, and their shows would be maybe a bigger presented, and I kind of thought, oh sweet Jesus, we are screwed. You know, it was the first time it was like that big of a stage, like, you know, because even in the Peacock and in New York, they'd all been fairly much contained to 120 or whatever, and then this was maybe 400 or something like that, and this was their small theatre, like, and I was thinking, oh, we are, and it was packed overnight, and you did feel it, like, you know, and so then I think that gave you the confidence then to go, well, if it works here, it works anywhere. Do you know what? But that very first time I thought, oh, are we going out now? Was this the first time? Have we just been lucky? You know, this kind of thing, has it just been? And we both thought like that, we'd be off the same like that, you know, so we were both kind of going, and we always used to say to each other, like, you know, let them come to us. The problem is if you try too hard with that play, it dies, like, so you're not being standoffish, but we want them to feel like it's okay to come with us and be with us and that kind of thing. So that's what we used to kind of be our mantra every night. But that night, particularly the first night in Brisbane, I thought, oh God, this might be now where it all goes horribly wrong. And it didn't. And, you know, and then that gives you the confidence then to go. But as for like doing Mind and Frankie and those kind of things, and maybe that's, you know, from musicals, to be honest, like I was never afraid of the big stage and the older theatre, like the Theatre Royal in Waterford. I would have done that with musicals, and, you know, they're taking them all in, everybody's included. Just because you're up in the gods doesn't mean they're not part of the production. And, you know, the funniest thing about the Gaiety, it's a beautiful theatre and I love playing there, but the very first time when I did Mall, I completely, and Marie Kearns had made the most fabulous sets. You felt like you were in it was the same in the field, actually. Both of those set designs made you, kind of cocooned you in a way to give you that fourth wall, you know what I mean, that felt like them. And I love actually being able to see somebody's eyes. It's not something that throws me, and I think that comes from the clowning or whatever. I'm quite partial to look somebody in the eye, and but you don't have that, so you don't even have that anchor of, can I even see that person is enjoying themselves, you know what I mean? So but the lovely set made it kind of so nice and cocooned that it was like, it's okay, we'll be fine, and we did Mall for the first time, and the lights or whatever way it was thing, I thought, there's nobody out there, there's about 100, I can see a couple of people in the front row, you know what I mean, or I can see the first couple of rows, but there mustn't be anything. And then we went to take the curtain call, and I never in my life heard a noise, like, you know, just because it comes at you, you know, it's perfectly built, so you hear the applause in a way that you never. And the light, suddenly I could see that they were all the way up to the very back, and I went, oh sweet God. And then I nearly, excuse my language, I nearly shat myself, because I was like, oh sweet God, it could have gone all horribly wrong. Like, and it didn't, thankfully, and it all, you know, passed out peacefully. But like, that was the first time I think I went, oh my God, I'm daunted by this. Because I think in the field I ended up, because I was doing a takeover and everybody else was so comfortable, I didn't have time to have nerves, because Dervla was doing one half and I was doing the other half, and then so I knew it was always going to be, I just had to slot in and hit the ground running kind of thing, like, and so it was a part that I was really, and then it was opposite Brian and all these people I was very impressed with on the stage, like Brendan Conroy and all this kind of thing. So there was all of those things that kind of made me think, I forgot about that the crowd was as big as it was, like, you know. And then a lovely encouragement from the lovely Joan O'Hara. She was the costume designer, and I ended up having to go on earlier than expected, because actually poor Dervla was unwell one day, so I went on stage with the book, because I was only after having one day's rehearsal, you know what I mean. So I went on and kind of slotted in, and but she was very kind to me afterwards, and she said, you had fabulous eyes and they hit the back of the theatre. So she said, I want to make sure now that your hairstyle does this and that. And I remember, like, she just passed it off. It was a comment, and I went, oh my God, you can actually see, you know, and it made me think, oh, that's great. It is going through then, like, to the back. But if she hadn't have said that, I'd have had no idea, like, you know, that I was penetrating to the back of the thing. Like. So a lot of, like, it's kind of, I think sometimes, like, if you're that in the moment of the thing, you do forget that there is a big enough crowd, and if you were to think about it, then it would become a little bit more nerve-wracking, like, you know. But
and do you get nervous?
No, I do. I like the buzz of it. Like, it's not a nerve that you'd be so bad, like, you know. I think there was one show now that we did the Alice's after we'd been doing it nearly continuously for 5 years, and then we had a break, and we were going on in Paris. And the two of us looked at each other going, sweet Jesus, we haven't done this. And, you know, we haven't rehearsed it. Like, we just had a bit of a panic. And that, I think, was that it was one of those, it was like you were living one of those I'm not ready to go on nightmares. And of course it was all in us and it was there and everything went fine. But it was, that was particularly nerve-wracking. You'd always be nervous though at the start of thing, but it's not crippling, thank God, touch wood, like that. It's not, and hopefully it won't ever get to that stage. Like,
and then around that time as well, you know, you relationship obviously Gary Hines with Big Maggie, and then you obviously worked a lot with Druid kind of over the years, and that, I suppose, there's kind of Druid, there's the Abbey, and of the, you know, our two national theatres on both sides of the
thing, yeah.
of the island.
But for me, Druid was a big thing, like, because I suppose if you're like, there's the Abbey's your national theatre, and of course you want to do that, but like you said, I'm glad you said it was the national, because I know when you grow up in Galway, it is your little national theatre, like, and for me it was a big deal, like, and when doing Druid Shakespeare was all my dreams came true, you know, for that, like, purpose of it, like, so,
and that, but I mean, I think as well, you know, to be part of that incredible kind of journey of those plays as well, and also, you know, opening them in Galway and then ending up to New York with them, didn't you?
New York at the Lincoln Festival, that's great.
But I think actually I was saying to David Bulger recently, I think the documentary captures really interesting backstage. You know, you got a sense from the documentary of what it must have been really like trying to put that.
Oh yeah. I mean, God bless them, because it was such a massive production with so many things in it. And actually, I think that, like, they filmed so much more that I think there's another whole documentary of what happened backstage. Like, Mick Lally's wife, who passed away unfortunately this year, she came to see the show in Kilkenny, and she was on her own, I think. So she'd met Marie on the break, and Marie said to her, "If you don't want to go out by yourself, come back in, sit backstage." And she said, "This is the best show ever." She saw a completely different show behind the stage with people flinging swords and changing, and they were a woman one minute, they were a man the next minute, and she was like clapping her hands thinking it was the greatest thing. So I'd love to see that footage sometime. I'd say it's gasback. Like,
I could just to go back a bit before we go on. And when you mentioned about kind of, you know, being Jimmy Face and a drama assistant back in the day, and then. And then being on the Abbey stage in one of his productions. I mean, that's mental.
It is, and it's particularly poignant because my poor mum was of the belief, my mum passed away unfortunately a number of years ago, and you know the way I'm, so would your parents have been like that? But when you left school, it was kind of a thing of, now that person is involved in that, why don't you ring them and say that you're, kind of thing. So they knew Jimmy from when I was in the Performing Arts School. So then they were like, now in the meantime, I had gone on to do my nursing qualifications. So it had been a long time. Now I would have met Jimmy and I would have gone to see the shows that the lads were doing. And I went to see, like, Bedrock. I loved all their kind of stuff. So I would have traveled to see all their plays and everything. And then he was in the Abbey and I'd meet him chatting away. And then I used to meet him kind of, like in festival clubs and fringe festivals, Spiegel tents and stuff like that. We'd have little chats, and I'd say to my mother when I met him, did you say that you were free? And I was like, it doesn't work like that, man. You have to get caught. You have to say, I think it does. No harm in saying that you're. I was like, could you imagine? So when when I auditioned for the government inspector, I heard the news a couple of days before my mum died, so she got to hear, and she delighted. When I told her I got the job, she goes, "I always knew Jimmy would come good," she said. So so it was a very special thing for me, like, you know what I mean, and for a lot of reasons, because it's a shame she never got to see it, you know what I mean, but she got to see me in the field, which was lovely, because she would have, bizarrely, and it never came up before that, it just came up when the man died. She used to, John B. Keane used to test his shows in Clonmel, where she was from, and he asked, did they know anybody who did shorthand? So she would sit in on his rehearsals and do notes and type up his scripts for him. So yeah, and so the mad small world of, like, years later, like, I never knew that story until we were both in the car the day he died from Galway on a rainy evening, and she said he was a lovely man. And of course, me being in my 20s, how do you know he's a lovely man? You know, and she said, well, I worked with him. And she told the story that he used to test the shows. He'd rehearse them in Clonmel and then bring them to Cork and put them on or whatever. And she even dated one of his actors. He had a little troupe of actors or whatever kind of thing. So she told me this story, like, which was great. So I was delighted that one of the last plays she got to see was in the field. She came up to see that, and she loved it. So it was a point, but I was delighted that she got to know that Jimmy did good. Jimmy came good.
I think people sometimes forget though that you know, the very blurred lines between, say, rural, but not rural and urban. You mentioned people that kind of chose to go into a career and keep acting, but not do it full time, and you know, in the amateur circuit and being involved. There's a very thin line between those worlds. From people, I mean, not necessarily mean skill sets, but the love affair with the theatre. Do you know what I mean? With the, you know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Come here, tell me then. You know, you kind of drew Shakespeare off to New York, and then you're in Rough Magic and the Abbey, the train. That was I didn't see it. I saw it in the Abbey, having not seen it, but it was absolutely amazing. Just the play, the play itself was amazing, but you could feel the energy around it of what it meant as well. You know.
Yeah. And it came at such a great time. Like, it was a very special piece. And I had worked with Arthur before with Performance Corporation on Slattery Sego Saga, and I had loved his stuff. And I went to go to see Rough Magic as a kid. Like, I would have gone to, and Pauline McGlynn, I'm a massive fan of it. She's also from Renmore, so we're up our side. And she's from up the road, yeah. And her family still live up the road from my dad. But I was a massive fan of and Owen Rowe, and obviously working with Martin when I did Team, you know what I mean? There was a Rough Magic connection there and stuff. And so I was delighted to be asked to be involved in the development of the train then. Like, you know, when I met Arthur, I'm always fascinated by Arthur, and I just think he's amazing, both as an actor and the kind of person you just like to get some little section of his brain and implant it into your own. It would be fabulous. But so when they asked to be part of it, it was very exciting. Like, and it was just, there was only three of us, three girls and Dara Kelly at the time, and Bill Whelan came in, and the song that I had to sing was kind of an hilarious story. I was doing a bit of work this week with Arthur, so we were talking about that, and there wasn't music, the script was written for it, and we were showing it to people, about 60 people that evening, and Bill Whelan at the lunchtime goes, "Would you like to write a song, Claire?" So we worked out the tune of it, and I learned it and sang it for Lynn, and she was like, "Are you happy to do it?" So we did it, and Cahill was playing for the presentation of this piece, which was like 30 minutes, and then he had to hop out, and Bill Whelan played for my song, and then he hopped out again. So it just felt like, again, like that you were involved in something from, you know, the beginning, and it is a very special piece, and just lovely. Do you know what was amazing was meeting the women around it, actually. That meant everything to me, and Mary Robinson and Nell and all these fantastic ladies too, whose names you wouldn't know, you know, but even the books around it, like reading up on a time really that we didn't know, you know, but for me, for my character, and it was something that I'd love to have discussed with my mum, like, had she been alive, because I think that was a big part of her life. Like, she worked for an obs and gynae consultant, so she knew things about birth control that she probably shouldn't have known, you know, this kind of thing. But what was lovely about it is that I had loads of women coming up to me afterwards going, "I was like you," and I'm thinking, God, I wasn't, you know what I mean? I came from a whole other world, but they are so associated with the character that they could, and a big thing was about the religion, that they felt that religion was very important to them, but that they couldn't be part of a church anymore that didn't want them, you know. And it wasn't an activist kind of thing. They actually just didn't go because they thought they can't, you know what I mean? Because they thought they weren't allowed anymore. And so I loved that. I loved nearly as much as doing the play and as being part of that play, I loved the bar afterwards, or the foyer afterwards, and the people that you would meet, because the amount of people, and Belfast as well. Like, I had a man who was, we were sponsored one night by a business company, and this man wanted to speak to me, and I said hello, and he said, "I'm sorry," he said, I'm a bit thrown. He said, I brought my predecessor here, thinking it should be a nice night out for him as the company has sponsored it. And he's gone home to talk to his wife because it's the first time they had been sleeping in separate beds since their children were born and done. And he just suddenly saw the play and went, what are we at? Like, we believed in something so strongly that we thought we couldn't. Do you know what I mean? To the thing. So your man was like to me, did you know that this was going to happen? I was like, no. But I said, it has touched a lot of people like that, like, you know, and so for me, it's extraordinary. It was an extraordinary thing to be part of, and I was very proud to be part of it, like, you know, and it was great fun as well. Like, I mean, the music was unreal. Like, yeah.
Just like I had both those components, the kind of, you know, the political and the kind of importance, but also it worked like, you know, it worked.
Yeah. Because all those women did. They were so funny. Like, they were gas, like how they told you the stories. And they had to be. They were so, and like some of the stories were heartbreaking of what they went through. And, you know, but we spoke to a gorgeous man, sorry, his name is gone from me now. And he was a fabulous guy. He used to help arrange pregnancy tests for women. He was an activist and he had seen terrible things. His mother used to take in women who were like deserted by their husbands or beaten and that kind of thing. And he saw this as a kid, and he went on then to help be a massive activist for women. And they used to be people from the special branch would sit in Bewley's to watch him, but he'd be dipping urine in behind menus in Bewley's to be able to tell somebody so that they would know that they were pregnant without going to their doctor, and then to see if they could do something about it themselves, like, you know. Which is, it's incredible. Like, yeah, it's like there was so many. That was only a tip of the iceberg. There was so much that was incredible about that time. Like,
and I mean, in your career, then you look at it, and you know, you also, which I think is hugely important, you know, that the presence of work for families and work for children has kind of been with you throughout your career as well. You know what I mean? And I think it's kind of, it's great that it's kind of changed an awful lot in the last 5-10 years, but like for years that was segregated off into, you know, into something else that was kind of, I think it's fantastic to see someone like yourself kind of, you know, swimming in both those channels, you know, in kind of, it's all one river. But also, I mean, again, like the Wizard of Oz in the Cork Opera House. I mean, Jesus Christ, what crack that must be.
That was unreal. Like, I had a ball. I got to fly. Happy days. My dream come true. And I got to work with Wayne Jordan. It was lovely. Like, and again, like that, things that happened before where we nearly worked together and it didn't happen. And so he was kind of very kind to offer me this part, and it was a absolute ball. And again, like a funny sort of, that was a massive theatre, and that many people, like any kind of work for young children that I had done had never been to that big a scale, like, you know, and so the noise was hilarious, like, you know, and there was maybe some younger actors who weren't quite used to going, are they going, is somebody going to tell them to stop? And I was like, they're children, they're going to make noise. That's the whole thing. Like, and you could, it was like when you watch the video as a kid, you know, the test was to hold them during the Kansas scenes, which are dull and not colorful and whatever, you know, and the setup basically. And you knew on the nights that it quietened down after the first few minutes that you were like, okay, we have them. Got them. We've got them. And then you knew you had them for Oz anyway, because it was just an explosion of everything. Like, but, it was again, it was lovely to work outside of, like, in a place where I'd never worked before. Like, I've been on tour in Cork, but I never lived in Cork or worked there. And for a long period like that, to meet a whole new bunch of people was again, otherwise you're just dipping into the Everyman or dipping into the Perkin Cray, you know what I mean, for a festival, for whatever. But you have to go to somewhere and live somewhere for a little while to know the people and to know their story. Like, and the Cork Opera House is like the Gaiety. It has its own family. It has its traditions through the years, and you know, so but it was a really lovely experience.
But I think, I mean, that's what's interesting, looking at your kind of path and your journey so far. Like, you know, you kind of move, as I said, seamlessly between these different worlds. And again, like with Angela's Ashes, in the Lime Tree, you know, and then back to the centenary, you know, the live television escapades. But I think, and then more recently working with Louise Lowe, and again that's a very specific type of work. And was that something which you kind of found daunting, or was it something that
I think maybe I was like, you know, for however much the Alice's was trying to show that we could tell a story and make it seem real, like there was an absolute, there's another joy to be actually, to be involved in documentary theatre. Like we weren't trying to pull the rug from under that with the Alice's. It wasn't that at all. It was just a sort of, that was the inspiration for it, like, you know, but then so many people saw these people as real that that's kind of what happened. And then it was lovely to actually be able to tell real stories, like, you know, and to involve in that. And that the only regret I have of that is that I missed the interviews. The actors did the interviews that ended up being the stories that we told. And I was involved in something else. So I came in on the second development of it, and then we went on. So the stories were already there. But Louise is a wonderful way of sort of, you know, we weren't assigned particular stories or people. It sort of became, we did everything. And then you graduated towards, well, who do you have an affinity to? Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if that's how she works all the time, like, but I think it might be because it's sort of a lovely way to kind of organically then play the person that you feel that you like. And and what is it's a lovely gentle process of how she does it, in that you don't, it's not about somebody having an ego going, oh, I think I should play that person because they're so different from me and it'll challenge me to whatever. Like, you actually just want to honor the person's story. So you want to tell it going, this is the person that, now I'm not a business owner in Limerick that has an alcoholic problem, you know what I mean? But I sort of, she was a woman, and the stuff she talked about was just stuff that you have felt in your life, about loneliness and trying to be the best daughter that you could be, or those kind of things that they really spoke to me for that character. Like, and again, other characters spoke to different people, and Louise has a wonderful way of doing that to make sure that those kind of things all fit and work, like, you know. And I like when I did the play, my own play that I wrote for a home theatre project, again, I was kind of thinking, oh, this will be different now because it's not a true story. Well, it is a true story, but it's my fictionalized version of a woman's story kind of thing. But yet still, she's for all that you might think that it's not a text-driven thing for a new, like, it is, because these people's words are still a text, you know. And so when I had a text, I remember being struck by that, because when you write something yourself, I suppose you're editing, and we had such a short space of time to do that thing. I took out a chunk of something thinking, oh, it's too flowery, it's too whatever. And she goes, and even though she'd only got it 24 hours beforehand, she said, where's that line that says that about the character? And I went, oh, I kind of could. Was it not too much? And she goes, I loved it. It was, for me, it summed up. I was like, oh. So she's drawn to kind of, you know, she's drawn to those words and sentences are just as important as the empathetic sort of relationship with you and the character. Like, you know, I'm fascinated by the work that she does, to be honest. Like, I love to be in it as an audience. Like, I like to be challenged and made uncomfortable. But then I'm a funny person too, as well. Like, I love Steppenwolf, like, used to come to the artists. So I love the fly on the wall drama. I love to be removed from something, you know. So I like it all, to be honest. Like, you know what I mean? I don't have to pick a favorite, and that's why I kind of think it's just as lovely to be involved in all of those things.
Compared to the writing, what was that like? I mean, was that something that you'd done? Was that something that was of interest to you? Was kind of writing there?
Yeah, I kind of always the time be scribbling away, do you know what I mean, and writing stuff, and I never had the courage, to be honest. And like, again, Veronica Coburn, like, only for her, like, I wouldn't have actually, even up until the week before, because they were trying to get all their numbers in place, and they didn't know if the lady that I was going to be with was, you know, so I think it kind of changed. I ended up with somebody else, but I was like, you know, the panic set in again, as it always does. Like, I used to always think if I was ever to submit a piece of writing, I couldn't put my own name on it because I'd be mortified, like, do you know what I mean? And yet I'd done so many developments where you'd write something, do you know what I mean? And people would go, oh God, that's great, you have a lovely, you know, you have a great, and I'm like going, no, it's, and then I thought, oh, I obviously can only work in a distracted state whereby I have a deadline of 5 minutes or 10 minutes to write a piece, and then it kind of works. So fair play to Veronica, she was just ignored me and went, no, you'll have the thing, turn up on this time. And again, I really, like, I was very much like, please, like the clown, a big part of studying clown when I was in Canada was like the no judgment. You don't judge yourself, you don't judge what happens, you don't judge the audience, you know what I mean? It has to be judgment free. You're leaving yourself open and vulnerable to whatever is happening in that moment, you know what I mean? But I remember kind of just sending it in going, don't judge me, I just don't know if it's good, bad or crap. And then it ended up being like, they were all really happy with it, and you know, so then that gives you a freedom then. So like, there's a a couple of things that I'm working on a project at the moment, and hopefully that would come to fruition, like, you know, and then if that would be so.
And then,
but whether I'd be good at it or not good, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? But it's a new skill, but I think we do it a bit all the time anyway, with improv and with stuff like that. We do quite a bit of it. So it's just a matter of trying to structure it now. And hopefully I have people involved in my project that'll help me in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And come here then, I mean, you know, in the last year or so, you know, the Unmanageable Sisters was again kind of a huge thing in the Abbey. And then Much Ado About Nothing was a huge thing on tour and a mental thing on tour, which is brilliant.
It's mental.
and then Trad. So I mean, there's kind of, you know, there's been that's a busy kind of couple of, you know, they're big shows, and also very, very different shows and different shows to use different muscles on. I mean, the Much Ado About Nothing was extraordinary. It was great.
I loved it. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
I know. I really like it's very like lovely to be talking about the thing, but I totally feel lucky all the time to be involved in anything. Like, do you know what I mean? Because it's so lovely, and it was so really nice that Ronan said to me, you know, I really want you for this part, and that it's going to be, you know, it's a woman playing the man's role, but it just seemed to work very well. Like the stuff, how it was, you know, we never changed a word. We just changed the gender sometimes. So instead of, it would be madam instead of Mr., or, you know, or sir, or madam instead of sir, or whatever. And like, that's literally all we changed. So it just seemed to fit a woman more, like when she talks about her womb and the disappointment of, you know what I mean? And that kind of, it just seemed to be wrongly in a man's mouth, which I know it isn't, like, but I think maybe that I had to go there in order to embody it in the thing. And I had such a ball with her. I just thought it was a great piece, like, and I'm very grateful now, because it was just, and a lovely bunch. And again, that was like, because like I didn't realize until halfway through that I was the elder lemon, you know, involved in it, like, kind of thing, you know. And something that people are like turning around going, I really learned a lot. You're like, what? Don't learn from me, like, I'm going. But it was working with a lovely bunch of new people who are coming out now, and Jack, who was out with Dee in Minefield, and like lovely youngsters, and Venetia Bow, like Patrick Martin. They're all fabulous young guys, like, and I just, their dedication, and it's a new world, and you're kind of thinking, oh God, I was such proud of them, and I know right to be, but I was proud to be in a cast with them. I was proud of the stuff that they were doing, and it felt like a really lovely ensemble, actually. And like, you know,
I mean, both those, you know, Much Ado obviously had the ensemble, but so did the
Unmanageable. Oh yeah, that was great. Oh my God, and what a bunch of people. Yeah, and everybody was kind of so, like, the amount of things that were said was hilarious. Like, to you, like, keep your head down now, don't get involved, so there'll be drama. And then and I remember it being the most relaxed, most supportive cast I've ever been in my life. The amount of times, like, it reminded me of, like, myself and my friends from home always joke about ourselves, going like we could look like the wreck of the Hespers and be like, you look great, how are you, look fabulous, you know, this kind of thing. And that was a bit of that going on in there. Everybody was supporting everybody and lifting everybody up, and it was an absolute blast to be part of it, like, and some amazing people involved in it that I just really, I had never worked with before, that I admire: Charlotte Bradley and Tina Kelleher and Deirdre Malloy and all these, Catherine Walsh, all these people that I'm massive fans of, like, you know. And to be anywhere near them on a stage, I was buzzing. Like, it was a great, and again, that was another show that was like The Train, that you got a kick out of being on the stage, but then you got just as much a kick of the people that you met afterwards, who told you about their lives in the flats, and like, some fantastic women, some very sad cases. We had a lovely letter from a lady who had been in a situation like the character that Quive O'Malley's character that played, that had to have, you know, her father knew about it and they helped her to have an abortion, but that they never spoke about it again. And she felt that something died inside of him in his love for her, if you know what I mean. He just found it very hard. And they went to that play not knowing that that was the subject matter, and had never spoke about it. And he, in the middle of the scene, reached over and grabbed her hand, and they went afterwards. They left the theatre straight away. They went for a drink and they talked about it, and it's the first time they had talked about it. And she wrote a letter to say that. So you're kind of going, those kind of stories, you're like, here, it's lovely, like, it's good.
And then you get to go on the magic trio of Trad.
Yeah. What a crack. They're boys. They're great. And I'd work with Aaron as well. Like, I'd worked with Aaron as an actor, so
yeah, of course.
it was fantastic. Yeah, but to see him in this other light, like, it was a joy. Like, and he works. He creates a lovely room. Like, it was a lovely thing. And also I knew Mark as an actor. Mark was in the government inspector with me, like my first job in the Abbey. So it was nice to reconnect, you know, with him too as well. And Emmett had been in the train the first time round. So anyway, but the one person I didn't know was Seamus. And the Seamus O'Rourke fan power I wasn't aware of now till we were going around the country. But it was fabulous to work with him, and, you know, I love it. And then this time around we had the lovely Gus McDonough play, who I'd been to college with. So we hadn't worked together since we did a play for young people with that Veronica had directed, that Deirdre Kinahan wrote many years ago. So it was a great joy for us to be back together on stage. And yeah, and they were a gift of a part, like, you know. And again, thank you to Aaron. And like I was saying, last year was a great year for directors thinking that I could play a lad, and that was good. I was grand and a lad. And Mark was very good. You know, he had said, like, absolutely no problem, like, you know what I mean, to change the gender and just to try it, and, you know, so it was great.
I won't keep much longer, but I'm interested then in kind of, you know, you've done a lot of work in different forms, like, so radio would have been a kind of would be there for you. That's something you kind of really enjoy.
Oh, I loved the radio plays. Yeah, and unfortunately constraints and recessions meant that there was a lot less of them, you know, but they have a fantastic set up in RTE, like Kevin Brew and the lovely I've just blanked on her name now. Sorry, that will come to me now, and I'll say the name. But they just run a really, and Kevin Reynolds obviously was the head of the department kind of thing. And again, that came through Veronica, my very first radio play. I had a lady in college, Miriam, who voice was a big thing, and we would have studied radio drama a lot, you know. And she talked about her days in the BBC and beautiful silky paper that made no noise and this kind of thing. And it just, again, like that, you see, the joy of the radio is that I can be 6 foot and size 3 and all sorts of things. You know, I can be anything I want to be, like, you know. And I grew up with the radio in the house. I grew up with the Harbour Hotel and all of those things. Like, it was a very big part of our life. So there was a lot of romance and maybe mystery about it when I first went in. But my first time in RT with the radio was Veronica was doing a device piece. It was a new thing where they brought a group of us in to a room, and we devised a play with Veronica. She went away and wrote it, and then we recorded it the following week, because they had done open auditions, and they had discovered that the bulk of the people coming to the audition were women in their late 20s, and they went to their piles of scripts and they had no parts for women in their late 20s. So they wrote this play called 27. Veronica wrote this play, and we won a gold medal in the thing. And it's the first time I worked with Simone Kirby and Kate Brennan, and it was great. And Amy and Katie Davis, and, you know, so it was a great buzz, like, and we were a girl band. We did a bit of singing too as well, and, you know, it was so that was my first thing. And then I went back and I worked with all the different kind of media. So Kevin Reynolds had the kind of the new way of the sort of the ambient sound and the natural sound, and then Aidan Matthews used to work with the more traditional way with the Foley artists. And I've always been fascinated by Foley artists. I just think it's I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I want to be part of that world if I could, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so did a radio play with him where people were making the cups of tea and the farmhouse doors were opening, and it was, you know, as it would have been back in the day. So again, there's less of them now, but they're still Goretti Slevin. Sorry, that's the other lady's name. She's doing a fabulous job out there. And what they're doing now is coming out to see new writers and giving them that opportunity to put it on the radio and to adapt it for radio, which is another skill again. And I just think they do sterling work out there, like it, and be great to, like, for more of it, I suppose, is what we'd all love, like, you know. But they just, it's a lovely setup, and they've got great energy, and they go to see theatre, they love the theatre. So, like, I think that makes a difference. If somebody loves the genre, they're going to put that bit much more effort into it, like, you know.
And come here, TV then, is that something, I mean, that's, again, hugely, there are 3 very, you include film in the wider kind of TV film, but they're very different. I mean, even between TV and kind of radio, it's a very, very different thing. And
very, very different. Yeah.
Do you enjoy being on sets?
Yeah, I do. I like the very first kind of thing I was on. I remember thinking just this panic because like you did an audition and then you don't realize, like you realize, well, you know now, like that actually you're not going to be chatting to the director on the day. They're very busy and you'll chat to 2 or 3 people down from them and you won't be getting Claire, we want you to. They basically just want you to do what you did in your audition. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing. Until such time as your work. And then TV is different because you are there with the director. You can chat and you can talk about a character. Or again, if you had a lead role in a film, you might have more of that interaction. So it was a great thing to like the first few bits and pieces that I did were a learning curve, like, you know, because when you're in college, they spend the whole time telling you, don't forget to ask about your frame, which really has nothing to do with the price of turnips at all, like, you know. And so I really learned on my feet, and then you build it up, and then the more they did, or the longer I did on things and on sets, the more I got to like it. And now I really do enjoy it, you know. But the first few times I was so nervous that I don't know if I actually enjoyed it or if it was just a very intense kind of, you know, and this kind of, it's like waiting, oh, it's over, you know, this kind of, and I found that very hard. And I think it's the sort of the thing with the nursing too as well. Like I loved to hear Helen talking about how Shane Medwell works. I mean, that would be the ideal, isn't that? That's like the theatre. You're going in there and you're spending each day going into the character, you're talking with the people, you're getting to know them, whereas a lot of the time you don't actually meet until you're waiting for you get a little chat with the person 2 seconds before you kind of, you know, while they're putting microphones on you, and then or maybe while you're having your costumes and you're sitting around and waiting. But so I found that initially a very hard shift to make, and then the more you do it, the more you go, okay, well that's my expectation now, and don't, you know, and it's fine. And then like I did a film earlier on this year that hasn't come out yet now, but I don't know if but it was with Christopher Walken and John Hamm and this kind of thing. And then you were starting to, and Emily Blunt, and they were chatting, and you're kind of going, oh God, they have the same things. Yeah. Do you know, like I was so surprised to hear them chatting about it in the way that we would, like, you know, or they're sitting around the green room playing games on their phone the same way that, you know, and I don't know what I expected, but I thought, well, they work in it. It just wasn't, it's not a world I know as well as theatre, like kind of thing. So I was delighted that they were as, you know, yeah, I'm on, I'm off, you know, this kind of thing. And they talked about the business in the same way. Their experiences were the same as ours. It's on a different level, of course, but like, you know, a lot of them, it took an awful long time to get to where they are too as well. And they haven't forgotten, you know, that's where they came from, like kind of thing. And so it's very interesting, and just talking about learning with different people, which was great. You know.
And come here, then Tiny Plays. What was that like?
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was so exciting, like, to know, to be part of, after so long, with the nothing. And then you get an email in your, like, literally in bed. And I turned around and said, I got a job. And he was like, how did you get a job? First of all, he said, there's no theatre happening. And he said, how did you get a job in bed? Like, you know, and I was like, well, and so I was so excited, and, you know, and then I felt a bit guilty about it because, like, they're tiny plays, obviously, and you have your part, and you're like going, should I not be playing 10 million other parts as well to justify my involvement? Do you know what I mean? Sort of thing. And fair play to Fish Amble, like, I mean, they're always, I loved the tiny plays when they did them in the theatre too as well. There's something, I like short films as well. I love the capture in a moment. I like short stories, that kind of thing, like where you can capture something and then it's gone. You know what I mean? It's fleeting and then it's gone. And so we didn't know what the other ideas were. Like, we asked Jim. Jim told us a little nugget of bits and pieces. But yeah, we just knew our own one. And Ciara Elizabeth wrote a fabulous play, didn't she? I thought it was great. And it was, for me, like, I mean, it is funny and it's very particular and everything, but I have a lot of friends who are working from home, and that divide there suddenly of everybody in your living room, and, you know, and also the no off hours. Like, it made a very strong, I thought she was very clever in the point she was making. Like, you're not paying me anymore. My hours have increased, but my money has reduced. You know, this kind of thing. And so, yes, there's the comedy and the lightness of it, but there's that very real point, and that's happening to an awful lot of people across the thing. Now, I would hope that their HR departments are better than myself and Rory Nolan, but
so
know. Yeah. but they might not be. So that's another thing.
Claire, I'm going to leave you at that. Thank you so much
Yes.
for taking part in this. It's been
Thank
absolutely
you.
lovely chatting to you. And look, if anyone finds the depths of the internet, we're kind of in August the 4th. It's sort of hopefully the end stage of a pandemic, but yeah, we wait and see. We wait and see. So hopefully see you out in the real world soon.
In 3D soon now. It should be great now, America. And best of luck. And thank you so much to Access and to yourself. I really appreciate it.
No worries.